This story caught me off guard, especially when everything started to come together. Because an accusation like this does not just damage a marriage. It can damage a man's name, his work, his family, and the way people look at him before he even gets a chance to speak. One lesson here is simple. When the story sounds too perfectly timed, do not only ask what happened, ask who benefits if you panic. And before this story begins, like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Story. My name is Malcolm Reed, and at 42 years old, I had built my life around being useful without being loud about it. I was a transit maintenance supervisor in Charleston, South Carolina, which meant my morning started before most people's alarms, checking ferry schedules, bus radios, repair logs, and the kind of problems nobody noticed unless they failed. My wife, Tessa, used to say I smelled like diesel, coffee, and responsibility. I took that as a compliment because I loved her, and I thought responsibility was how love stayed standing after excitement wore off. Tessa was 38, a middle school assistant principal with perfect handwriting, polished shoes, and a habit of correcting crooked picture frames in other people's houses. She was not cruel. That matters. She could be warm, funny, and sharp in a way that made people listen. But she also loved being admired. If a room did not notice her, she found a reason to walk through it twice. I used to think that was confidence. Later, I understood it was hunger. The dangerous kind, because hunger can start looking like a plan. Her younger sister, Janelle, was 29 and worked the front desk at a boutique dental office near Mount Pleasant. Janelle was pregnant when this started, 5 months along, with ankles swelling in a lavender notebook where she wrote baby names in looping letters. She had always been emotional, but not unstable. She cried at commercials, forgot bills until they became emergencies, and trusted the last person who sounded certain. I had never been alone with her long enough for anyone decent to build a rumor from it. That was why the accusation felt designed, not born. I loved Tessa because she had once seen me before anyone else did, when I was still working night shifts and studying for certifications at our kitchen table. She would sit across from me grading essays, tapping a red pen against her teeth. She made tea when my hands shook from too much coffee. She framed my first promotion letter and hung it in our hallway. Marriage, to me, was not fireworks. It was someone remembering how hard you fought to become yourself. I held on to that memory longer than I should have. Every Thursday, I stopped at Bell's Diner after the early route review and brought Tessa a biscuit sandwich before school. She used to meet me at the side entrance in her blazer, smiling like I had brought flowers. Then, slowly, she stopped coming outside. First, she sent students to get it. Then she said carbs made her sluggish. Then one morning she took the bag from me without looking up from her phone and said, "You still do this?" It sounded small. It stayed with me because love notices when gratitude changes shape. Public disrespect rarely begins with shouting. In our case, it began at her school's spring fundraiser inside a renovated warehouse near the waterfront. Tessa was laughing with a man named Councilman Andre Voss, a polished black man in his late 40s who wore pocket squares like campaign promises. He had influence over school funding and liked people knowing it. When I walked up, Tessa introduced me as my husband, Malcolm. He keeps the buses breathing. Everyone laughed. I smiled because the joke was not ugly enough to confront, but it had teeth. Andre looked me over and said, "Transit work is important. Somebody has to keep the city moving." The words were polite. The tone was placement. Tessa touched his sleeve when she laughed. Just 2 fingers, quick and familiar. I noticed it. Then I told myself not to be insecure, because I was not that kind of man. That was my first decision point. I could have asked her in the car why she made me feel like a service worker at her event. I chose silence because I did not want to start a fight over feeling. After that night, Tessa began treating my questions like interruptions. If I asked why she was late, she said, "Meetings, Malcolm, adults have them." If I asked why her phone stayed face down, she said, "Privacy is not betrayal." If I mentioned Andre, she smiled without warmth and said, "Do not embarrass yourself." That last sentence taught me where I stood in her mind, not as a husband raising concern, but as a man she believed she could manage with tone, timing, and a little humiliation. Janelle started coming around more often that summer. She said the pregnancy made her lonely. She would sit at our kitchen island with ginger candy, rubbing her stomach and complaining about the baby pressing on her ribs. Tessa hovered around her like a nurse and a handler at the same time. When Janelle spoke, she glanced at Tessa before finishing certain sentences. I noticed, but I blamed pregnancy nerves. That was something I did too often in my marriage. I kept finding gentle explanations because harsh ones would have required action. The first real clue arrived on a Saturday morning at Russell's barbershop, where the radio always played old soul music and men argued about football like policy analysts. My barber, Quincy, leaned close while lining up my beard and said, "Your wife is still working with that Voss man?" I kept my eyes on the mirror. On school funding, yes. Quincy paused. Clippers buzzed behind us. I saw them at Harbor House Tuesday night. Looked like more than grand talk. I did not move. My face stayed calm. Inside, something took one careful step backward. I could have confronted Tessa that day. I almost did. I drove home past corner stores with hand-painted signs, past church ladies selling plates under a blue tent, past buses I knew by engine sound alone. By the time I reached our driveway, my anger had sharpened into something useful. Confrontation without proof gives a liar rehearsal. So I chose patience, not weakness. I put Quincy's comment in a notebook I kept in my work bag. Date, time, place, exact words. My father taught me that a calm record beats a loud accusation. Tessa came home that evening, wearing perfume I had not bought and earrings she usually saved for formal events. She kissed my cheek, missed a corner of my mouth, and said she was exhausted. Her phone buzzed during dinner. She glanced down, smiled before she could stop herself, then placed it under her thigh. I asked, "Good news?" She said, "Work." I said nothing. She looked relieved too, quickly. That relief hurt more than a lie, because it meant she had expected me to be easy to redirect. The body language between Tessa and Andre became harder to ignore. At a district breakfast, he stood too close behind her chair while she spoke to parents. She did not move away. He handed her coffee prepared exactly how she liked it. Oat milk, no sugar, cinnamon on top. When I raised an eyebrow, she said, "He remembers details." That is what effective people do. It was a comparison dressed as praise. I smiled because there were donors nearby, but my hands tightened around the paper cup until the lid bent. 2 weeks later, Tessa announced a leadership retreat in Beaufort. One night, she said, packing a cream blouse and the green dress she wore when she wanted to be unforgettable. I asked who would be there. She named 6 women, 2 principals, and Andre last, like an afterthought she hoped would pass unnoticed. I said, "Andre is going?" She folded the dress slowly. "He chairs the education committee, Malcolm." Then she added, "Please do not start." That sentence had become her favorite fence. Anything behind it was territory I was not allowed to enter. The night she left, rain hit the windows hard enough to sound like gravel. I ate leftover chicken alone and watched the ferry delay alert crawl across my phone. At 10:43, Janelle called me crying. She said she was cramping and scared. I told her to call Tessa. She said Tessa was not answering. I asked where she was. Janelle said, "Outside your house." When I opened the door, she stood on the porch soaked through, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping that lavender notebook like it could keep her upright. I brought her inside and called a nurse line while she sat on the sofa breathing too fast. The nurse advised observation, hydration, and urgent care if symptoms worsened. I made ginger tea. I stayed in the kitchen, visible, careful, because I understood boundaries even before anyone questioned mine. Janelle calmed down after 20 minutes. Then her phone lit up with Tessa's name. She looked at it and did not answer. That was strange. When I asked why, she whispered, she told me not to bother her tonight unless it was serious. Janelle left after midnight. When her friend picked her up, I watched from the porch as the car pulled away through the rain. My second decision point came right there. I could have called Tessa until she answered and demanded to know why her pregnant sister was at our house terrified while she ignored calls. I did not. I texted only, "Janelle came by. She is safe." Tessa replied at 1:18 a.m. with, "Why was she with you? Not is my sister okay?" Not, "Thank you." That response opened a door in my mind. Tessa returned Sunday afternoon with shopping bags from a store in Beaufort that did not match a professional retreat schedule. She kissed the air near my face and said the sessions were draining. I asked about her hotel. She said it was fine. I asked whether she had seen my text. Her eyes changed before her mouth did. "Yes, Janelle told me." "Told you what?" I asked. Tessa looked away. That she came here. The way she said it made the visit sound like evidence, not an emergency. I understood then that something was being positioned. 3 evenings later, the accusation arrived. Tessa asked me to sit at the dining table. Not beside her, across from her. Janelle was there too, pale, swollen-eyed, both hands around a mug she never drank from. Tessa placed her phone between us and pressed play. Janelle's voice came through, trembling. "Malcolm is the father. It happened that night at the house when you were in Beaufort. I am sorry, Tessa. I did not know how to say it." The room became so quiet I could hear the refrigerator motor click off. I looked at Janelle first. She stared at the table. Then I looked at Tessa. My wife's face held pain, yes, but under control. She was watching me the way administrators watch students after setting a trap question. I felt anger rise, but I did not give it my voice. An innocent man does not need volume when the lie has weak joints. I asked, "Janelle, what color shirt was I wearing that night?" She swallowed. "Navy, the one with the fairy logo." That answer came too quickly. Tessa had washed that shirt the next morning. "What did we talk about?" I asked. Janelle's mouth opened, closed. "The baby." "What did I make you?" "Tea." "What kind?" She blinked. "I do not remember." I nodded slowly. "You remember my shirt, but not the tea you drank while supposedly committing the worst betrayal of your life." Tessa snapped. "Do not interrogate her." I turned to my wife. "No, that is exactly what I'm going to do." My voice stayed low. I saw Tessa's confidence flicker for the first time, just enough to tell me I had touched the seam. Honestly, this is where I think things went wrong for Tessa and Janelle. They expected Malcolm to react like a guilty man or a panic man, but he did something smarter. He asked small questions. That is important because a rehearsed lie usually survives emotion, but it struggles with details. At this point, what would you have done? Would you have walked out, called the family immediately, or stayed calm and kept asking questions? I stood and said, "Nobody leaves this room believing I accept this." Tessa said, "You need to take responsibility." I looked at her for a long moment. "For what I did, always. For what you built, never." I walked out before anger could make me careless. I drove to my cousin Marva's house in North Charleston. Marva was a family attorney with a laugh like a church bell and a mind like a locked file cabinet. She opened the door in house slippers, saw my face, and said, "Tell me slowly. Do not protect anybody." Marva listened without interrupting. She asked for dates, texts, names, and the hospital nurse line number from the night Janelle came over. Then she said, "This is not only about pregnancy. This accusation gives Tessa leverage. Social leverage, emotional leverage, maybe financial leverage. We need to know why she needs leverage right now." She told me to preserve every message, avoid private conversations with Janelle, and act normal until we had a full pattern. "You are not hiding," she said. "You are documenting." That sentence steadied me more than any comfort could have. For 9 days, I lived inside my marriage like a man walking through a house after smelling smoke. Tessa moved around me with careful disappointment, speaking softly when others could hear, coldly when they could not. She told her mother she was processing a betrayal. She told 2 friends she needed prayer. I knew because one of them, a deacon's wife named Mrs. Cora, called me and said, "Son, I do not know what is true, but I know when somebody is spreading before seeking." That woman gave me my first outside witness. The hidden clue came from our smart doorbell subscription, which I had almost canceled months earlier. I checked the footage from Beaufort night. Janelle had arrived at 10:41 and left at 12:08. She never looked frightened until she saw the camera. Twice, she stepped onto the porch and typed long messages. At 11:16, a dark sedan rolled slowly past our house, stopped under a live oak, then continued. The plate was blurry, but the bumper sticker was clear. Voss for Coastal Schools. Andre's campaign slogan from last year. Marva used a licensed investigator named Mr. Harlan Baptiste, a retired postal inspector who wore suspenders and smelled faintly of peppermint. He found the Beaufort Hotel records first. Tessa had not stayed with the retreat group. She had checked into a waterfront inn under her own name. Andre Voss had checked into the adjoining room 12 minutes earlier. Their rooms shared one balcony. The investigator also found restaurant charges, parking garage timestamps, and photos from a nonprofit volunteer who had accidentally captured them holding hands near Marina. No scandalous scene, just enough truth. The bigger motive took longer. Andre was not just an affair partner. He was a powerful enemy because he had something to lose. He was pushing a city-backed education redevelopment proposal involving Tessa's school campus, donor money, consulting fees, and political visibility. Tessa had been promised a director role in the new program once it passed. That role came with status, salary, and a public image as the woman who helped reshape coastal education. A pregnant sister accusing her husband gave her sympathy. A disgraced husband gave her freedom. A quiet divorce gave her clean hands. Then the strangest part surfaced. Janelle's baby was not Andre's, and it was not mine. The father was a physical therapist named Omar Keene, a decent man from Colombia who had dated Janelle for 6 months before she cut him off. Omar did not know about the pregnancy because Janelle had told him she needed space, then blocked him. Tessa had discovered the pregnancy before anyone else and turned it into a tool. She convinced Janelle that naming me would keep Omar from taking custody interest and keep the family contained. That was the word Janelle later admitted Tessa used. The betrayed wife alliance started with a phone call I did not expect. Andre's wife, Dr. Selena Voss, called Marva's office first, then asked to speak with me directly. She was a dermatologist, elegant, controlled, and clearly tired of being underestimated. She said, "Mr. Reed, I know enough to know my husband is lying. I do not know enough to understand why your name is involved." We met in a quiet booth at a seafood place where the lunch crowd was too busy with fried shrimp to notice two strangers comparing notes over unsweet tea. Selena had emails, not romantic ones, strategic ones. Andre had written to Tessa about timing, optics, sympathy positioning, and the benefit of Malcolm being morally compromised before the redevelopment vote. My name sat in those emails like a tool on a table. Selena's hands did not shake when she slid printed pages toward me. Mine did not either. That surprised me. Maybe there's a point where hurt becomes so large it stops moving around and becomes weight. You either carry it properly, or it crushes your posture forever. We did not plan revenge. We planned corrections. There is a difference. Marva sent legal notices to Tessa, Janelle, and Andre, demanding retractions of the accusation and preservation of communications. Selena's attorney filed an ethics complaint tied to Andre's undisclosed relationship and potential misuse of public influence. Omar was contacted with care, not drama. He deserved the truth about his child, not a circus. The public event came because Andre refused to withdraw from the redevelopment hearing. He believed people like me would avoid microphones. He confused restraint with fear. The hearing took place inside a county education building that smelled like floor wax and old paper. Parents filled folding chairs. Teachers whispered in clusters. Tessa sat near the front in a cream suit, face composed, hands folded over a leather folder. Andre stood at the podium, speaking about integrity, children, and community trust. Selena sat 3 rows behind him. I sat beside Marva. My heart beat hard, but my face stayed still. When public comment opened, Marva touched my elbow once, not to push me, just to remind me I was ready. I walked to the microphone and gave my name. I did not call anyone names. I did not mention bedroom details. I said a false allegation had been used to damage my credibility during a public funding process. I stated that legal notices had been served and that documentation had been provided to the ethics board. Then Selena stood. She gave her name, her profession, and her relationship to Andre. She confirmed undisclosed conflict concerns. The room shifted, not exploded. shifted. That was worse for Andre, because serious people understand serious silence. Tessa stood halfway, then sat back down when Marva turned and looked at her. Andre tried to interrupt, but the board chair told him to wait. A woman behind me whispered, "Lord have mercy," like a prayer and a verdict together. The redevelopment vote was postponed pending review. No one cheered. No one clapped. That mattered to me. This was not entertainment inside that room. It was a public correction of a private scheme that had stepped into public money. I walked back to my seat with my hands steady, and my marriage already behind me. Legal consequences came slowly, the way real ones do. Andre resigned from the Education Committee 6 weeks later, citing family priorities. The ethics review found disclosure failures and improper coordination, not enough for prison, but enough to end his political momentum. His donors went quiet. Selena filed for separation and kept her statement short. Tessa was placed on administrative leave while the district reviewed her conduct. She was not dragged out of the building. She simply stopped being invited into rooms where she used to be welcomed. That kind of consequence is quieter, but it lasts. Janelle broke first. She came to Marva's office with her parents and cried into tissues from a box Marva kept for clients who learned too late that tears do not erase paperwork. She admitted Tessa coached the accusation and gave her the shirt details. She admitted the voice memo was recorded twice because the first version sounded too flat. She admitted she was scared Omar would leave and scared Tessa would stop helping her with rent. I listened from across the room. I did not comfort her. I did not punish her. I let the truth do its work. At this point, I would not call Malcolm cold. I would call him clear. There is a difference between forgiveness and access. Someone can be sorry and still not be safe around your life. Janelle had pressure on her, yes, but she still made a choice. Tessa had ambition, yes, but ambition does not excuse turning family into weapons. Do you think Malcolm owed Janelle a second conversation after she confessed, or was listening once already more than enough? Omar stepped into fatherhood with a seriousness that made Janelle ashamed in a different way. He asked for a paternity test through proper channels, attended appointments, and started preparing a nursery at his apartment before results were final. He did not humiliate her. He did not disappear. Watching him behave decently made the lie look even smaller and uglier. Janelle moved back in with her parents for a while. Her mother loved her loudly. Her father loved her quietly. Neither looked at her the same. Trust did not leave the family, but it stopped sitting close. Tessa came to me once, 3 months after I filed for divorce. We met at a small coffee shop near the Battery because I refused to meet inside our house. She looked thinner, not broken, but reduced. She said, "I never thought you would actually leave." That was the sentence that told me everything. Not that she thought I was guilty. Not that she believed the lie. She believed my love made me manageable. I said, "That was your mistake." She cried then, but softly, almost privately. I did not feel victorious. I felt finished. The divorce was not dramatic. We divided assets, corrected false statements, and signed documents in rooms where nobody raised their voice. My name recovered because the record was clear, but recovery still took time. Some people apologized. Some avoided me because they had repeated things they should have questioned. At work, I kept showing up before sunrise. I checked radios, reviewed route delays, and trained a younger supervisor named Ellis, who reminded me of myself before I learned how expensive trust could be when placed in careless hands. A year later, I bought a small house in Somerville with a screen porch and a pecan tree in the yard. Every Thursday, I still stopped at Bell's Diner, but now the biscuit sandwich was for me. I sat by the window, watched the buses roll past, and felt peace arrive in ordinary pieces. No applause, no grand revenge, just mornings that belonged to me again. And if this story held your attention, like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes the strongest ending is a man choosing not to carry the lie anymore. This situation shows how dangerous it is when someone uses a serious accusation strategy. Malcolm did not win because he shouted louder. He won because he slowed down, documented details, asked careful questions, and refused to let panic make decisions for him. The shirt detail, the doorbell footage, the public hearing, and Tessa's final sentence all pointed to the same lesson. When someone underestimates your boundaries, your calm response can become a line they never expected you to draw. Let me know what you would have done to Yendi.